The wind reaches you before the snow does. It pushes across the open plain, finds every gap in your clothing, and steals heat from your skin. There is no cabin waiting beyond the ridge, no manufactured tent, no heater, only what you can build. You gather branches, reeds, hides, stones, and bones. The materials look weak, crude, or even grotesque. Yet by nightfall, they must become the difference between sleep and death. What were the strangest shelters your ancestors ever built? The answer begins with a problem. Most prehistoric houses vanished. Wood rots, grass collapses, hide decays, snow melts. Even a carefully built shelter can disappear until only a shallow stain, a ring of stones, or a pattern of objects remains in the ground. Archaeologists study this disappearance through taphonomy. Taphonomy means everything that happens to remains after they are abandoned, including decay, trampling, water movement, animal disturbance, and pressure from later soil. A shelter made from mammoth bones can survive. A shelter made from reeds may leave almost nothing. That creates a distorted picture. The strangest shelters are often not the most common shelters. They are the shelters made from materials unusual enough to survive. Your ancestors probably used countless windbreaks, lean-tos, brush huts, hide tents, and temporary sleeping screens that left no clear trace. A few rare sites preserve enough evidence to rebuild the lost idea of home. Begin beside a lake about 23,000 years ago. The place is now called Ohalo II, on the shore of the Sea of Galilee in Israel. You choose a low patch of ground close to water, fish, edible plants, and fuel. Then you bend branches into an oval frame and cover them with brush. The finished hut is not large, one excavated floor covered about 12 square meters. That is enough for a few people: tools, food, bedding, and a small amount of movement. The walls are made from material that should have vanished, but the camp burned and was quickly covered by rising water and fine sediment. The water protected the remains from ordinary decay. Archaeologist Danny Nadel and his colleagues uncovered the floors and wall bases of several oval brush huts. Inside one hut, Ehud Weiss, Mordecai Kislev, and their team studied tens of thousands of seeds and plant fragments. The pattern was not random. Plant food was processed near a grinding stone. Stone tools were made in another part of the hut. An access area remained between them. Your shelter had an interior plan. That matters because a home is not only a roof, it is organized behavior. You place dirty work in one area. You keep movement through another. You return tools to familiar places. Even inside a small hut of branches, space begins to carry memory. Where do you sleep? Probably away from the busiest working area. Where do you place food? Close enough to use, but not directly in the path. Where does smoke leave? Through gaps in the structure, an opening, or a roof that never becomes completely sealed. The hut must balance protection and ventilation. Seal it too tightly and smoke becomes dangerous. Leave it too open and wind removes the warmth from your body. Every shelter is a negotiation between air, heat, water, space, and available material. At Ohalo II, the strangest detail is not the brush. It is the survival of ordinary life. Wooden objects lay on hut floors. Plant remains clustered around work areas. Small traces revealed that your ancestors did not simply crawl beneath branches and wait for daylight. They created rooms without permanent walls. Now travel east to the Azraq Basin of Jordan about 20,000 years ago. The landscape around Kharaneh IV included wetland resources surrounded by drier country. You collect reeds and sedges near water. Sedges are grass-like wetland plants with strong stems and leaves. You use them to build and furnish a hut. How can archaeologists identify plants that vanished thousands of years ago? They study phytoliths. Phytoliths are microscopic pieces of silica formed inside plant tissues. Silica is a hard mineral material. When the plant decays, these tiny shapes can remain in the soil and sometimes reveal what kind of vegetation was present. Monica Ramsey, Lisa Maher, Danielle McDonald, Danny Nadel, and Arlene Rosen studied phytoliths from a hut at Kharaneh IV. Their results suggest that wetland plants, including reeds and sedges, were used heavily in the structure and its interior. Imagine the building process. A woody frame creates the shape. Bundles of reeds cover the frame. Sedges soften the floor. More plant material blocks wind near the base. The shelter is made from a wetland. You are not only occupying the landscape, you are rearranging it around your body. A reed wall is light. It can be carried, repaired, replaced, or burned. It may not last for generations, but permanence is not always the goal. A mobile group needs a shelter that matches movement. Why build a stone house if food will be somewhere else next season? The best shelter is not the strongest object you can imagine. It is the structure that provides enough protection for the amount of labor, transport, and time you can afford. This is the first reversal. Temporary does not mean careless. A short-lived hut can contain careful planning, skilled material selection, and a strong sense of place. At Kharaneh IV, repeated occupation and unusual caches of shell, red ochre, and animal horn show that the settlement carried social meaning as well as practical value. Ochre is a mineral pigment that often produces red or yellow color. Some huts were eventually burned. Fire could destroy a shelter, clean an area, which mark the end of an occupation, or become part of a social or mortuary act. Archaeology does not always reveal the exact intention. A house can disappear in minutes. Its meaning can survive in the way people return to the place. But reeds are not the strangest building material. For that, move north into the cold plains of what is now Ukraine around 18,000 years ago. Trees may be limited. Wind moves freely. Large animals dominate the landscape. Around your camp lie the enormous skulls, jaws, shoulder blades, pelvises, tusks, ribs, and long bones of mammoths. You build with them. At Mezhyrich, archaeologists uncovered 4 large arrangements known as mammoth-bone dwellings. Pavlo Shidlovsky, Stefan Payan, and other researchers have studied the structures, activity areas, pits, tools, and animal remains surrounding them. One structure used mammoth skulls and other large bones around its base. Jaws could be stacked. Tusks formed curved. Flat bones and long bones appeared in different parts of the construction. Was the entire house made from bone? Probably not. The surviving bones may have formed a foundation, lower wall, outer weight, or support for a framework of wood, hides, bark, or other materials that decayed. Reconstructions differ because the roof is gone. That uncertainty is important. An archaeological ruin is not a photograph. You see what survived, then test different explanations. Still, the scale of the material is astonishing. A mammoth skull is heavy, a tusk is long, curved, and difficult to move. Building with these parts required cooperation, planning, and knowledge of how irregular shapes could support or stabilize a structure. Why use bone? Bone was available. It resisted decay. Heavy pieces could anchor lighter coverings against wind. Flat bones and hides may have helped block cold air. The same animal also provided meat, fat, fuel, tools, and raw material. Nothing had only one purpose. A mammoth could become food, fire, equipment, and architecture. That does not mean every bone came from an animal killed by the people living there. Some may have been collected from older carcasses or natural bone fields. The exact source remains debated, but the shelter changed the meaning of the animal. Outside, a mammoth was dangerous prey or a massive dead body. Inside, it became a wall. Picture the night the wind strikes the outer covering. Heavy bones hold the base in place. A fire burns nearby or within a managed hearth. People repair stone tools, scrape hides, divide food, and listen for changes outside. The bones do not create comfort by themselves. Comfort comes from the entire system. Covering, fuel, floor, clothing, body heat, group size, fire management, the position of the entrance, the direction of the wind. A shelter is technology spread across many objects. This is why the mammoth bone house is stranger than it first appears. It is not merely a pile of bones shaped like a hut. It is an answer to a treeless, cold, demanding world. Now enter a shelter that nature built first. A cave seems perfect. Stone walls block wind. A roof already exists. The temperature changes less dramatically than it does outside. You can move in without carrying mammoth skulls or cutting hundreds of reeds. So why did ancient humans not simply live deep inside caves? Because caves create new dangers. Light disappears. Smoke gathers. Damp air chills the body. Narrow passages restrict movement. Predators may already use the space. The deeper you travel, the more fuel you must spend just to see. Most cave occupation happened near entrances or in zones where daylight still reached. But at Bruniquel Cave in southwestern France, Neanderthals carried fire and broken stalagmites more than 300 meters underground around 176,000 years ago. Stalagmites are mineral columns that grow upward from cave floors as dripping water leaves deposits behind. Jacques Joubert, Sophie Verheyden, Dominique Genty, and their colleagues studied 2 ring-like constructions made from hundreds of deliberately broken stalagmite pieces. Traces of fire appeared on parts of the structures. No one knows their exact purpose. They may not have been houses at all, but they reveal something extraordinary about shelter and space. Neanderthals entered a place far beyond natural light, selected and broke cave formations, moved pieces into regular arrangements, and maintained fire underground. The cave already protected them from weather. they still transformed the interior. Why build inside a shelter? Because humans rarely accept space exactly as they find it. You create a center, you define an edge, you place light where darkness feels uncontrolled. You separate one activity from another. The Bruniquel structures may have served ritual, social, technical, or symbolic purposes. The evidence does not provide a final answer. The mystery is part of the lesson. Shelter is not always about sleeping. Sometimes it is about controlling fear. A ring of stone can make an enormous cave feel smaller. Fire can turn a black chamber into a shared place. An arranged boundary can tell everyone where to stand, work, gather, or watch. Home begins when space stops feeling random. This helps explain an even older controversy. At Terra Amata in southern France, excavator Henry de Lumley interpreted patterns of stones, posts, hearths, and artifacts as the remains of huts built hundreds of thousands of years ago. Later, archaeologist Paula Villa challenged parts of that reconstruction and argued that geological processes and repeated occupations made the evidence more complicated. Were these true houses? The answer remains disputed. That disagreement shows how difficult early architecture is to prove. A neat oval in an illustration can look certain. In the ground, the same hut may survive as scattered stones and stains mixed by time. Your ancestors built before architecture became easy to recognize. The earliest roof may be archaeologically invisible. The oldest wall may have rotted completely. The real history of shelter is therefore longer than the list of surviving houses. And the strangest shelter may be the one that left no trace. A windbreak of branches used for one night. A hide stretched between poles during a storm. Snow piled around sleeping bodies. Grass placed beneath an injured person. A screen protecting a fire from wind. These structures were temporary. Their effects were not. Shelter changed human movement. It allowed children to sleep. It protected tools and fuel. It created a place for food sharing, teaching, healing, storytelling, and conflict. The roof was only the beginning. Return to the freezing plain. The wind is still moving toward you. The materials at your feet still look inadequate. Reeds bend. Branches snap. Hide tears. Bones are heavy. Yet your ancestors combine them. A frame rises. A covering closes. Stones or bones hold the base. A fire finds its protected place. People move inside and arrange the small world around them. You began with nothing but open ground. Now there is an inside and an outside. The strangest shelters were not strange because your ancestors lacked better ideas. They were strange because your ancestors could turn almost anything into home.